I get very cross when I see people massacring the verse. There's another I think it's a TV film or film of Hamlet, and the "Oh, what a rogue peasant slave am I" is absolutely massacred because he turns it into well, I mean, I don't know how sensitive to language you're, but I mean, it's a masturbation. I mean, it's just, as we would say in English, it's a wank. I mean, you know, it might have felt very good doing it, but oh God.
Um, You're not appreciating the material. You're just going through the motions, basically.
You're not. You're allowing yourself to revel. No, to wallow in the emotions without sharing it with the audience.
That's an interesting point.
I mean, there are two. I mean, I'm not going back to the 1950s and 1960s voice beautiful. John Gielgud, an actor whom I absolutely respect and admire, but I mean, there's an apocryphal story about him when he was doing one Shakespeare, and of course he had that magnificent voice, which and so he could get carried away sometimes too, and he sort of, and there's a story when he was delivering one speech, and he came off stage and went, "Oh my God, pure opera." He's criticizing himself. I mean,
right,
for getting so carried away, but no, I mean, the fascinating thing I found, more and more I look at this, is the more you respect the verse and the more you actually make the verse work for you, the more natural and spontaneous it sounds. Which might seem contradictory to some people given their training, but if you really do respect the verse and really do hit those apparently unimportant words which have fallen on strong beats, it starts to sound much more conversational.
Yeah, because because my and I'm sure this is a general this is like a general way of viewing Shakespeare. It's always been seen as highfalutin and sort of artificial. You know, when people want to go to a Renaissance festival, for instance, everybody puts on the Shakespeare talk, but they kind of forget that Shakespeare is supposed to, it's supposed to be natural. It's supposed to flow. It's supposed to be conversational. So I totally agree with you. You know, Shakespeare. You know, we need to stop having Shakespeare be this artificial kind of something that you put on to sound impressive, and just bring it down to the everyday level. Kind of like with what you were doing back in the day when you were trying to take Shakespeare out to the, to the working class areas and making it accessible to everybody.
Yeah, I mean, one of my treasured memories from that tour was we were in, I mean, literally a working men's club. I mean, they had entertainment, but it would, well, if it was in the States, it would have been a country band. And so, because we could offer it free because we had this grant, they had accepted to have us, and so on. And so after the show, we were taking the set down, and the chairman of the chairwoman of the works committee came to me and said, "Thank you. You know, I really enjoyed that." And of course, being middle class, snob educated, I asked, of course, I immediately I'd asked the question. I went, "Oh my God, how could you ask that question, you fucking idiot?" And I said, "So did you understand it?" I mean, which is so patronizing, and as I say, I mean, yeah. And she said, with her glorious working class accent, "Oh, I didn't understand a word, but I knew exactly what was going on." And I went, "Bless you, lady."
Mission
That's
accomplished.
That's exactly what it's all about. You don't need to understand intellectually every single word, but you do need to know what's going on, and that's where the actor comes in.
Oh wow.
And there's one very famous well, there's a word, Fadge, Fadge, Fadge. It occurs twice in the whole of English literature, both times in Shakespeare. Once, it's a wonderful word. I wish I would like to reintroduce it into the English lexicon. I don't know if you know Twelfth Night, but Viola has dressed as a boy, and she's been hired by the Duke to go and woo this rich widow who he's in love with, but he can't do it because he's the Duke and she's only upper middle class, and so he hires his page, his boy, which is a girl, dressed as a boy, to go and woo Olivia on his behalf. And so she does what she's told, she does what she's paid for, and she goes to Olivia and she starts to woo Olivia on behalf of her boss. And then at one point, after one of her meetings with Olivia, Olivia sends her servant to interrupt to get to catch up with Viola, and to give him a ring. And the ring, and she says, "This is return this ring to your boss." Well, she didn't leave a ring. So this is obviously some sort of subtle message on Olivia's part to say, "I kind of fancy you."
Oh, I remember this now. I remember this.
Yeah, and so you've got the wonderful situation where you've got a girl dressed as a boy who goes to woo a woman on behalf of her boss, and the woman starts to fall for the boy
Instead of the boss.
instead of the boss. So her loyalty to her boss is now in question, is now in jeopardy, and also she's got this problem of this woman who is basically coming on to her in no uncertain terms, and she goes, "Oh my God, how will this fudge?" Now, you don't need to go running to a dictionary to look up fadge to figure out what the word fadge means.
I think I can sort of get it from context here.
Yeah, I mean, and it's the only time it's ever used. Well, apart from when Love's Labour's Lost, I think. If this fadge not, we'll have a banquet, and he only uses it twice, and nobody else has ever used it anywhere.
Not Marlowe or Ben Jonson or anybody?
No, nor any other writer since in 400 years. Um, so, but I use it. I use it a lot.
I'm gonna start using that myself now.
Yeah. Well, this isn't going to Fadge well, is it?
You and me, Colin, we'll reintroduce into the English language somehow.
Well, yeah, maybe we can get Donald Trump to use it, because he's in a situation which is not going to Fadge well. Oh, I mentioned the unmentionable. I'm sorry.
Oh no, you're fine. You're fine. Colin, I could talk to you for hours and hours, but I do want to be respectful of your time. Now you did mention before we started recording, there was was it a seminar or a program you were gonna do this fall?
Well, there's two projects that I have on in the making. One is I will be running weekly. What I'll do is I would take a speech every week, a different speech, and break it down in the way that I was talking about earlier into the iambic pentameter, the function of the 5 beats, and how when you respect the iambic pentameter and you look at those 5 beats and you respect what the function of those 5 beats is, you get totally different interpretation of what that speech is about. You know, I keep surprising myself every time I do one. You know, and so those will be weekly, and they will probably be on Eventbrite. And then there's the how does the scholar look at Shakespeare differently from a player, and how does a player look at Shakespeare differently from the scholar, and where can we complement each other instead of being at odds? I mean, I've had conversations with. Are we still recording?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because I know you mentioned that earlier, about having that dialogue to see, you know, where the two can sort of reconcile with their understanding of Shakespeare. Colin, I definitely do want to.
I'm going to say something, but can you edit it out?
Well, I mean, I guess you can mention it after recording.
Okay.
But yeah, I definitely do want to bring you back for future episodes, just because I feel like there's just so much to unpack. And honestly, I honestly, this has changed the way I've looked at literature, or Shakespeare, I should say. I know you don't like classifying Shakespeare as literature, so I'll try to be respectful of that. But before we wrap up, are there any particular movies or TV shows or plays that you've seen recently that you want to?
Okay, I'll tell you the story of Baz Luhrmann's Romeo and Juliet.
Okay.
And my personal connection with it. I generally hate, it's generalization, modernizations of classics. You know, if you're going to do La Traviata, then do it in 19th century Paris. You know, don't set it in early 20th century South Africa, for example.
Right.
I mean, there was, and so on. I mean, I just generally hate modernizations of classics, whatever they are. You know.
So Richard III set in a fascist state is not a good idea.
in general, I don't like it. I think because I think in fact, well, there's a there was in 1920s there was a Shakespeare critic who started Shakespeare Society, I think. And he said something which I've always taken to very much to heart. If the director thinks they're bigger than Shakespeare, then they're not aware of their own limitations.
Very true.
And so when you start to set Richard III in a fascist state, or what was it? There was a Hamlet done in Stalinist Russia or something, fairly recently. It starts to become more about the director than the play. And it's, we get the director's vision, and the play becomes secondary to the director's vision. So when the publicity for Baz Luhrmann's Romeo plus Juliet came out, I went, "Oh God, I'm a great fan of Baz Luhrmann, but oh please, And I was working with a young man at the time, who, and this is some time ago, who turned up at my doorstep with a bottle of whiskey and the VHS, the cassette, of Baz Luhrmann's Romeo plus Juliet.
Mhm.
And he knew me quite well, which is evidenced by the bottle of whiskey. And he said, if you want the bottle of whiskey, you have to watch this. And I went, Kevin, really? And he said, yes. And I went, well, I'm not turning down a bottle of whiskey. So we put the cassette in the machine. We poured ourselves a glass each, and off it went. And within 3 minutes, I was totally hooked. Totally. And I went, wow. And on the back of the box of the VHS, it says, Shakespeare has never been this sexy, which I think is an absolute absurd remark, because Shakespeare is always sexy. If you think it's sexy, it is sexy. If you don't think it's sexy, then you quite simply haven't seen it yet. And I was totally hooked, and right throughout it. And I thought, this is the most truthful to the play version I think I have ever seen. Now, given the visuals, the play was written in 1590 something, and set in Italy in a summer. It takes place over 3 days. Think of that as, but it is the most truthful I have ever seen to the play itself, and it's a play I know extremely well. I probably quote about a quarter of it from memory, and at the end, I was absolutely, at the end, I said, well, thank you for the bottle of whiskey, but thank you for making me see this, because I would never have seen it. I would have refused, given my prejudice.
Right.
And it is prejudice, I admit it. But And then several years later, I was in England. We have charity shops, and people bring things into the shop for people to buy, and the money goes to a charity, Save the Children or Oxfam or whatever. I mean, and so I was looking through the DVDs, and I came across the DVD of Romeo and Juliet, and I thought, I don't actually have a copy of it. So I bought it. It's £5 or something, and I brought it home, and I realised there was a making of. There's the DVD of the film itself, and then there's the DVD, a second DVD with all the interviews and some outtakes and other stuff. I mean, as they do, as they do with DVDs. And there was an interview with Baz, and about how it came to, about how the film came to be. And so he told the story of, I think it was it after Titanic or before? I think it was after Titanic.
Yeah, Titanic was 97, I believe.
And he was at a party in Hollywood, and there was a big time producer there, and he was talking to him, and DiCaprio came up and joined the conversation, and the big time producer turned around to DiCaprio and said, "You got to play Romeo, and you got to direct it." And so I mean, getting any film together, of course, the biggest problem is getting a big time producer on board. And so there you've got the director, the actor, and the big time producer, and the script. The rest is, for filmmakers. Filmmakers will know what that means. I mean, you've overcome 70-80% of the hurdles right on at a party in Hollywood. So a couple of years later, or not that very much long later, the producer called up Baz and said, "Okay, we're ready to go. So what do you think?" And he said, "Well, okay, yes, right, fine. Shit, what do I do now?" So in this interview, he said, "Okay, everybody's done Romeo and Juliet. What the hell do I do with it?" And he said, "Okay, there's only one way to approach this, and that is to empty my mind of every Romeo and Juliet I've ever seen, everything, every preconception that I've ever had about the play itself." And he got his secretary to type it up as a film script, not as a not as a literary or text, or as you would find it, but literally in exactly the same way as you would have any other film script presented. And he said, "I locked myself in my office for 3 days and told my secretary to hold all calls, and I just looked at the script, having completely emptied my mind of any other preconceptions, and I just let my imagination go with what came off the page." That's why it works for me, because he didn't come to the project wanting to put his mark on it, he let everything that he put into that film come from the page first.
So he let the script inform the movie, not
Yeah.
okay.
Oh, I mean, obviously they then had to cut. I mean, certain scenes and certain. I mean, they had to go through probably with a fairly heavy pair of scissors because. But it's organic. It's even though the setting is not 17th century Verona. What he did is organic, and it's organic because it comes from the script, not because he wanted to do something original.
But it still felt authentic though, because I've seen that movie and it feels authentic even if it's not set in the, I guess, quote unquote proper time and place.
Yeah, well, it's also what he managed to do. I mean, and that's because he's a master filmmaker. He managed to make it everywhere and nowhere. Yeah, it could be South Africa, it could be Los Angeles, it could be, I mean, it's obviously somewhere hot, but it's not actually somewhere. Yeah, it's not Los Angeles gangs. And then making a statement about, make Juliet black and Romeo white, and then make a statement about racism, or I mean, or like they did with West Side Story, Puerto Rican versus American, But that was different because they made something inspired by. They did not do Romeo and Juliet. They created a piece of work which was inspired by Romeo and Juliet, but it wasn't pretending to be Romeo and Juliet.
Right.
So yeah, that's and that was one of the biggest surprises of my life, that objectively I would, as I say, I would never have watched it, but I did watch it objectively, except that it was so completely engaging that you just taken into it, right from the beginning, right from that very opening.
I mean, it's also a good example of how you can do Shakespeare right, by making it contemporary, but not but also being faithful to the story at the same time.
Yeah.
Okay, excellent. So Colin, before we wrap up, is there if people are interested in reaching out to you, how can they learn more about your work or get in touch with you?
Well, Shakespeare Unbound .com is a website on which you can buy access to the streaming of the show. ShakespeareUnbound.com.
And you also have a YouTube channel as well.
I have a YouTube channel. I sent you the link to that,
and I'll put that in the description below.
There is also, I keep meaning to make it, to update it, but the Shakespeare workshops.blogspot.com, where I talk much more about the workshops.
Okay. I'm just making a note of that now because like I said, I definitely want to put all that in the description below because it is a really really fascinating topic and it's something that isn't really explored in detail. But I feel like after having this conversation, I'm going to go back and read all the Shakespeare plays now and approach it quite differently, or read it in a very
Yeah,
different
I mean
manner.
that's part of my um crusade is to, okay, people like reading Shakespeare. I think it's better to watch it, but people like reading Shakespeare. But okay, but bear in mind when you read it that it wasn't written to be read, it was written to be performed. So when you read it, try and put yourself in a performer headspace rather than a literary critic headspace.
Yeah, because that's how it was meant to be, originally. Anyway.
Well, I mean, if you think about it, as I say, everything was handwritten at the time. So by the time the first night came around, the first performance of, I don't know, Measure for Measure came around, there were only probably there were only three people who had ever seen the entire play. Presumably the author, the book holder, or the stage manager, we would call him now, but the book holder, and the censor. I mean, that's kind of mind-blowing to think about.
Yeah, absolutely. Kind of lose sight of that, but I think that's something we definitely need to bring back, along
Yeah.
with the word Fadge.
And I mean, by the time the folio, up until the time when the folio was printed, there was probably only one copy, handwritten, of that play in existence.
Wow.
And in fact, in the play Shakespeare Unbound, I kind of suggest that, in fact, there wasn't any copy of the entire play because some of the prompt books would have been lost in the fire in 1613. So in order to put the plays together, John Hemmings and Henry Condell would probably have had to go around the actors, the players, and say, look, can you give me your copy, your cue script for Taming of the Shrew, Measure for Measure, etc., because we want to print the plays and we don't have a full copy. So, those cue scripts would have been in the possession of the players and therefore not, fortunately, in the in the theatre when it burnt down, the Globe, and so reconstructed the place from the cue scripts. It's something it's a conjecture on my part, but it's more than possible.
I mean, it kind of makes sense when you think about it, based on what we've discussed today. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and wrap up the episode, but remember to like, comment, subscribe, and let us know what you think about Shakespeare. Let us know what your favorite plays are, and hopefully, Colin, we'll get you back for future episodes.
Be more than happy to.
Excellent.
Okay.
All right. Well, thank you all so much for watching, and have a great day.
Okay. Bye.